take a look at the Derby. Kind of some quick thoughts as before you go with your selection. What are some key factors that are before you arrive at your selection?
I think the biggest key factor is the three inside horses. Ocho Chocho, Carpe Diem, Materiality. To this point, all of them have mostly shown speed. Carpe Diem was taken back one time. If you're a fan of Carpe Diem, I think this is a disastrous draw for him because really the tactics are out of their hands now. Either he's going to have to drop out the back or he's going to have to push forward because he's in between two speeds. My guess is that they'll go forward with him because that's typically been the case. But like I said, in the British Cup Juvenile, he did come from the back, so that we can't say that that's not a possibility. Either way, it makes his, this challenge for him, I think, much more difficult than it would have been in the first place. So I already wasn't going to use Carpe Diem, but I think he's a complete toss at this point from that post position. My top choice in here is Dortmund. If you follow me on Twitter or Facebook or wherever, that's no surprise. I've been a fan of this horse for a little while, not quite as long as you have, but for a fair bit now, and I think he was drawn beautifully in this race. He's just such an intimidating presence on the track, whether he's galloping or racing. Every single move he makes is with authority, which you love in a race like this, where you're jockeying for a position of, with 19 other horses. He has a good head about him. He has, natural speed, but he's tractable. He's not going to be in the back, no, but he can sit mid-pack, and he's shown us that he's capable of doing that. He showed us that last year at Churchill Downs when he won an allowance race. I think he's absolutely the one to beat here, and the brilliance of it all is that American Pharoah is probably going to go out favorite. I think he's the moneyline favorite, and I wouldn't be surprised to ultimately see him favored here. I think this race is going to be pretty quick fractions early on with those three speeds drawn inside, and with Stanford, I think he'll go forward, as should American Pharoah. So yeah, I would think if this is Dortmund's race to lose. Others who I'll be using are Upstart, who has been very consistent throughout in Florida. He's one who in his races there was not much speed. I think that really dictated their tactical decisions with him. He has won in the past from dropping back and making one run. I would not be surprised if they made that decision to run him that way here. I think he's better when they run him like that as well. So not worried about the illness. He seems to have bounced back from that fine. It seemed like it was just something very minor. I haven't heard any word of him not, other than looking wonderful on the track since. So he's one who I'll also be using. I'll also be using El Khaibir. I really liked his wood, and I've liked him, kind of throughout. I think people have labeled him a non-stayer, and I do think he'll stay. Again, another horse who should drop out the back and be closing late into these, what should be pretty good fractions. And then the last one I'll use is Danzig Moon. Like him since before he broke his maiden. I thought he showed some improvement last time out in Kentucky over at Keeneland. And another one who just sounds like he's training really well into this race. And he's a type who I like because he's a little bit more lightly raced than some of these. So, he can kind of warrant a little bit more improvement in races than some of the others as well. So, Dortmund on top, but in pick threes, doubles, any of those multiple race wagers, I will also be using Upstart, El Khaibir, and Danzig Moon.
I ended up, so on the pace, do you think the pace will end up being more contested or more of a fast pace?
I think it's going to be contested whether it's I don't think it'll be contested in that there'll be several horses in a line. I do think one horse will go forward. Most likely candidates for that are probably Ocho 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 or Stanford, but right behind that kind of breakaway leader, I expect it to be contested. A nice pack of horses right there just in behind.
Yeah, I think I ended up my handicapping, which is not usually done this way, is I just started Xing out horses. I mean, for the first time in years, I mean every single workout report War Story's a toss.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Z's a toss. Keen Ice is too slow. I'm not a fan of Tensidor. I mean, so I just started eliminating 6, 7 horses immediately. Um, if I was going with, there's 2 horses that I've liked since day one. I was a big fan of Dortmund's Maiden Win, and I mean, yeah, I'm a horse fan as well, and he's just this big, goofy looking dinosaur horse, and so yeah, I'd love to see Dortmund win. I've also been a big fan of Upstart, just from the start of his career, and I liked him how they brought him back in 9 days in that New York Stakes race when right after he broke his maiden and he ran a 1:16.4 and chase down the speed. So, I mean, I've always kind of just been a big fan of those two. I do think that I still don't know what to do with that Florida Derby, but as really as the Triple Crown races started to appear this spring, American Pharaoh's just looked too good for me. I'm just going to go with him. It just seems like everything's on go. I do think there was something wrong with him. Yeah, he's wearing a plate on his foot, but he works out 136 miles, and his coat is shiny, and he's going to be forwardly placed. Do I think he needs a lead? Yes, but I'm not so sure he's not going to get it. Um, so I guess I'll just go down swinging with him. The only difference between me and I think a lot of handicappers is I really like Carp Diem in this spot. I think if American Pharaoh somehow gets involved in a suicidal speed duel, I think Carp Diem is the one that's going to pick up the pieces. But so I'll use Carp Diem as my defensive hedge, um, not really to make a lot of money, but to get my money back.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to use American Pharaoh. If he wins, I am going to try to hit the superfecta because I think people have gone way over the deep end. They're looking for the golden soul. They're looking for the commanding curve. And I think it's going to be American Pharaoh, Upstart, Dortmund, and I'm going to go 3 deep in second, 3 deep in third, 4 deep in fourth, and it might pay $1,000, and it might be the 4 of the 6 favorites on top.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right to a degree. I mean, I can see, a horse like Upstart, isn't a favorite and but isn't a huge price, and those are kind of the horses I could see getting up there and for a minor award. But like you say, everyone's looking for a golden soul, everyone's looking for a commanding curve, and I feel like they're making cases for like they're trying to make cases for horses here to be those, and none of the ones that people are making cases for, War Story, Keen Eyes, Fermento's not in the race, but should he end up getting in, those they haven't done anything that we saw Golden Soul or Commanding Curve do leading up. I mean, Commanding Curve in particular, we talked about the Louisiana Derby on here last year, and I thought he made such a huge statement in that race. You watched that race, and anybody, I don't care how long you've watched racing, you knew that horse wanted further. None of these horses have shown that. Keen Ice, I believe, has actually lost ground to International Star as the distance has progressed. So I don't get it at all with some of these kind of plotter types that people are making a case for in this race. Just because you run in the back and come on at the end of races to some small degree doesn't mean you always want further.
Yeah, and I think, there's another horse that I don't necessarily, like I say, I'm not a fan of, and I don't know, I just think like a horse like Firing Line in a normal year would be a top contender.
Yes.
I really like this horse. Now, I mean, I'm not the type that plays six. I just can't play 6 or 7 horses. I got to go 2 deep, and that's it. It's a 20 horse field. I play 2 horses. I live and die with my selections. But I think Firing Line on his worst day is never going to lose to a Keen Ice or a Far.
Yes.
Like I think people think like, oh, he's going to make a move and finish 18th. Like no, Firing Line is not going to finish 18th in this race. Like
No.
unless he cuts out 109 change fractions, yeah, then he might. But if he does that, then horses. Like I just
Yeah.
think they're better.
No, and I mean that's a really good example because it's one I'd completely agree with. Like, I'm the same way. I don't use like a ton of horses. Maybe if I go 4 deep, that's usually my max. So, Firing Line isn't one who's making the cut for me as far as the horses I will be using. But I'm the same way. Like, I can't see him losing to Keen Ice or to War Story. It just he's better than that, and that's that. I think that's what is such a big thing about this year's race is that it's not just that we have a few really nice favorites. It's that even that second tier of horses is so strong. Even them in a normal year, you could say Upstart or Firing Line or Materiality in a normal year would be 3-1, and we're seeing them at 10, 15-1.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I guess, where I'm a little bit different. I just think people are reaching a little too far, and it just seems like, we saw all these favorites win in the prep races,
Yes.
and I think even in those prep races, we had two groups of horses. We had the favorites that were just 3, 4 lengths better than everybody, and I just don't think an extra eighth of a mile is going to solve the riddle for a lot of these horses, and for quite a few of them, I think it's actually going to get worse for, especially if, War Story, when you just read the reports, he's not coming into this race well. Mr. Z is not coming into the race well. Stanford can't get a mile. I mean, I just don't think he's going to get a mile and a quarter. Materiality, I think he's talented, but I think it's a lot too soon, and I think he might be a pace casualty. But, even a horse like Materiality, who I'm not going to use, like, I can't imagine that horse even losing to a War Story or
No.
some of these other horses.
No, Materiality for me is the one I've really gone back and forth on. Like, I might, he's the one for me, like you said, you might end up using a few defensively as a hedge. If I were to do that, it would be with him, because he is the one that I'm not planning to use on my tickets, but I'm very afraid of. He is lightly raced, which are types I tend to like, in big races, even if it hasn't worked out in the Derby to this point. I tend to like the lightly raced types who are improving by leaps and bounds each race. And for Materiality, I do honestly think people have penned him wrong. I think that people see him as a horse who needs the lead. I expect him to be forward in here just because of his post position, but I do ultimately think he is a versatile horse. But given he only ran 3 times in this year, and you had to win those races to get points, he was going to be sent forward. Pletcher knows, I have the best horse, we need points, you gotta go. So I think he's kind of unfairly been penned as this horse who needs the lead, really because he's just gotten aggressive rides in his races so far. So he's a horse I really like. I like him going forward out of this race. I can't, use him everywhere here because a lot of it's because of his post position, but I do think he's really talented, and if he won, it would be a sad day for me because he's kind of that. He's my also eligible.
Yep. Well, let's talk, we talk about selecting. Now, how are we going to play these horses? Let's take a look at your Oaks-Woodford Derby pick 3 then.
Yeah, for me, we already talked about the Oaks, and I said I'm going too deep there with Stellar Win and with Ocean Wave. The Woodford Reserve's a really interesting race in that I think, we have some horses who've been running, some horses who are coming first time out. We have a horse shipping in from Dubai. I'm planning on going 3 deep here with Grand Arch Seek Again and Stephanie's Kitten. All 3 are classy types. Seek Again would be my top choice in there. I love this horse, and I think he, really showed us he's an improving type and kind of a progressive sort. I think he can definitely make his name among the top turf milers this year. And this race, of course, he nearly won it last year, finished second behind Wise Dan. So I'll go 3 deep in there with Stephanie's Kitten, Seek Again, Grand Arch, and then I'm going to finish it up here in the Derby with Dortmund, Upstart, and El Kibir. So I'll use 3 here as well. So it'll be 2 by 3 by 3. For me that's a little bit of spread, but just trying not to get too crazy, because if a horse like Dortmund wins the Derby, then you don't want to put too many horses that you win the bet and lose money. So that's kind of the way I'm playing. So if Stellar Win and Dortmund win, I still want to make sure that I'm making a little bit of money there, so I can't go too crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to go kind of a spread ticket too, but my theory is I'm going to punch a couple of the more obvious favorites, maybe for $1, and then play a couple other combinations for 50 cents. So I'm looking at, for the Oaks, I really do think the Oaks has some potential. So I'm actually going to go 4 deep in the Oaks. I'm leaning Lovely Maria. I am going to use Ocean Wave. I'm going to use Bird at the Wire, and I'm going to use Eskin for Money. Just because I just think Eskin for Money is going to really float. And I think she's going to kind of be at the lead at some point. Then who knows? She may get run down, but I want to have her for some reason. Second race, I'm going to narrow it down to 3. I'm going to go with Stephanie's Kitten. For some reason, I'm going to include Slumber, even though he kind of tends to be the second-itis. And Chocolate Ride, who I think is maybe going to be I think Joe Talamo's going to give him a good ride, and those last couple of races are competitive with this group and with a few horses coming off layoffs. And then with like you, I'm going to go 3 deep in the Derby. I'm going to use American Pharoah. I'm going to use Carpe Diem, and then just because I've liked them all along, I have to use Upstart because if all of a sudden it comes in Ocean Wave and Upstart, I'll be sitting in California with you then, and
No Dortmund anywhere. Wow.
oh yeah, I just I like Dortmund. He's just that big goofy guy, but for some reason I've had it in my head that he's not going to win the Derby. So may run second, may run third, maybe run the best race. I'm not sure. But I'd rather it go for the 18-1 or 14-1 on Upstart and really go for the crush than maybe get that $200 one. Not to say that I don't like $200, but I'd rather have a chance at that $1,000 pick 3 with Upstart.
Yeah. One horse I want to make mention of, we're not really going to go into detail about the Woodford Reserve Turf, but one horse I wanted to mention in here was Umgeo, who also trains Move to Hij, brought over here from Dubai. He's 30-1 on the morning line, so I don't want to talk anyone off a 30-1 shot, but I don't really think he's going to end up being 30-1. I expect him to take quite a bit of money, especially coming off. Some of the DRF guys have really praised his most recent work with Move to Hij as well. For me, I could not use him. His most recent run in Dubai, he was 3.5 lengths behind Mushawish, who I think is a really good barometer because he's a very consistent miler out here in America, and I don't think Mushawish would win the Woodford Reserve Turf by 3.5 lengths. Not to mention Mushawish in Dubai had a lot of issues and for all intents and purposes was kind of running on 3 legs. He had 1 foot that was really, really bad. So it's just not exactly flattering form, I don't think, and he's getting a little bit up there in age and just is one who perhaps had potential but has just never really blossomed and shown it. So just because he's shipping out here, I don't want people to go running to kind of the foreign turf horse angle because I don't think he's good enough in the spot. He is not getting Lasix as well. He's a horse who, to me, just really looks as one who came here as a traveling companion with Move to Hij more than anything.
Well, thanks again for joining us along the Triple Crown Trail as we've been talking Derby and Oaks contenders for the last few months. Make sure to check both of our blogs as we have some wagering strategies and some further information. Well, good luck to everybody on their Oaks and Derby wagers here from Down to the Wire.